They were supposed to be the girlfriends, the wives, the bookkeepers. 6 of them ended up running it instead. What connects them isn't how much product they moved. It's how long everyone around them refused to believe a woman was giving the orders. From a teenage mother moving weight out of South Central to an aunt packaging cocaine inside her own family's house, these 6 built power in the places nobody thought to watch. The one who did the most damage never touched a gun. That story comes at the end. Ana Griselda Blanco Restrepo came into the world on February 15, 1943, on Colombia's Caribbean coast. She was 12 when her mother moved the family into Medellin. She surfaced in Queens in the early 70s, knowing something most traffickers never worked out. Cocaine was not a supply problem, it was a luggage problem. Blanco had lingerie built with hidden compartments, bras and girdles sewn to carry powder through customs. Then she put women inside them. The first federal indictment landed in 1975. She went home to Colombia, waited it out, and came back to Miami instead. The city never recovered. 2 names followed her. Traffickers called her L.A. Madrina, the godmother, for her standing among the men who built the Medellin pipeline. The second was La Viuda Negra, the Black Widow, and that one came from arithmetic. 3 of her husbands died violently. It was never settled in a courtroom, and nobody in Miami waited on a verdict. Reporting put the volume near 300 kilos a month and the revenue around 80 million. She kept a standing crew of shooters called Los Pistoleros. Her people worked out of vans with gun ports cut into the panels. She is credited with putting gunmen on motorcycles, a method that spread across 2 continents. Investigators estimate she was connected to roughly 40 killings inside the United States. One was a 2-year-old boy, hit when her men went after his father. Rivals started hunting her, so she left Florida for Irvine, California. DEA agents took her there on February 17, 1985, and she handed them a false name and false papers on the way out. 15 years. Then Florida charged her with 3 murders on the word of her own gunman, Jorge Ayala. That case nearly collapsed when it emerged. Ayala had been having phone sex with secretaries in the prosecutor's office. She pleaded guilty in 1998 and was deported in 2004. She had just finished at a butcher shop in Medellin on September 3, 2012. 2 men on a motorcycle pulled alongside her and put 2 rounds in her head. The agent who arrested her said she had not been hiding, that neighbors spoke well of her and she gave money to the poor. In Miami, she is the woman who taught a city how to kill from a motorbike. In Medellin, she was a 69-year-old grandmother buying meat. Thelma Wright was not supposed to be anybody's problem. She grew up in South Philadelphia, went to Temple University, and by her mid-20s looked like a woman whose worst risk was a bad mortgage. In 1976, she was walking on Broad Street when a red convertible slowed to turn. The driver was Howard Wright, and everyone called him Jackie. He was a heroin wholesaler tied to the Black Mafia, which ran Philadelphia's drug trade into the 80s. They married and had a son. For 10 years, she lived beside the business without touching it. Then came August 1986. Jackie was found inside a house in Germantown, rolled up in a carpet, shot once in the head. Thelma was left with a toddler and a choice. People assumed for decades that he left her money. She has said flatly that he did not. What he left was a phone book. The street started calling her Boss Lady and Queen Pen. Neither name came from a crew or a christening. They came from the fact that the routes stayed open after he died. The business did not miss a step. Those routes ran between Philadelphia and Los Angeles. Product heading east, cash heading west. By her own accounting, she cleared more than $400,000 a month at her height. She dressed like a professional, kept her circle small, and told nobody in her family what she did for a living. Her advantage was the thing every man in that trade underestimated. Nobody was looking at the widow with the green eyes. There was no raid and no indictment. The summer of 1991 is when it stopped. Inside about 6 weeks. A friend was killed in a shootout, an associate was arrested and sent to prison, and a month later her connect was executed by a rival crew. She walked away that year. Thelma Wright was never charged with a single drug offense. She spent the 90s raising her son. In 2009, she took a job managing housing for women in recovery. Her memoir landed in 2011, the first anyone outside her circle heard of any of it. Mary J. Blige optioned the story for television. She now runs a foundation for at-risk girls and speaks inside prisons, including a women's jail in the city where she moved a product. She never spent one night in a cell for it. Jemeker Thompson's story starts on a South Central sidewalk, years before the FBI opened a file on her under the name Queen Pen. She was 8. The furniture came out of the apartment and sat on the pavement while the neighborhood watched. She has said that eviction explains everything that followed. She wanted money and she wanted control, in that order. She was sent to her grandmother in Mississippi and came back at 14. She ran track in high school, then met an older man named Anthony Mosley, who everybody called Daff. He had money and he was moving cocaine. She started with him, married him, and had his son. Daff was outside washing his car in South Central when somebody shot him dead. Thompson stepped back for a while, then returned as the principal rather than the partner. The Bureau eventually coded her investigative file Queen Pen of Los Angeles, and that is where the name entered the official record. Some say she took it for herself first. Either way, it stopped being a nickname and became a case designation. Then it stopped being local. She built distributors in cities across the country and pushed up the supply chain until she was dealing with Colombian producers directly. She did all of it through the exact years crack was hollowing out South Central. She was never recorded on a wiretap. She was never caught holding weight. She was never filmed making a hand-to-hand. What ended it was a former bodyguard named Percy Bratton, known as Cheese. He got stopped with kilos in his car and traded her for a deal. Thompson ran. She moved city to city for roughly 18 months, using her own network to stay ahead of federal agents. Then her son reached his 6th grade graduation. She came back to Los Angeles for the ceremony. Agents were already inside the school, and she was arrested in front of him at 31 years old. She was convicted of conspiracy to distribute cocaine and 5 counts of money laundering, sentenced to 15 years, and she served 12 of them before walking out in 2005. Today she is Jemeker Thompson Hairston, an evangelist who founded a ministry called Second Chance. She wrote a book about all of it and speaks to women coming out of federal custody. Her son became a professional skateboarder. Delronda Hood did not choose the name Big 50 and has never pretended otherwise. It came from her figure, and she has spent 4 decades refusing to be embarrassed about it. She was born on Detroit's East Side in 1965, the oldest of 4. She was pregnant at 15 with a son named Rodney. By 18, she had worked out that Detroit would pay for what she had. By her own account, she and a close friend set up an arrangement the neighbors could set a watch by. A red limousine came down the block every Thursday. The 2 of them got in, came back out a short time later, and split $2,500. That was the entry point, not the business. The business was cocaine. Hood moved into it while Detroit was being carved up by the Chambers Brothers, the Curry organization, and a teenage informant the papers called White Boy Rick. She never had a crew name or a corner. What she had was a reputation for handling her own money and her own problems. In that city, it counted for more than any affiliation. By the 90s, she was one of the wealthiest women in the Detroit underworld, and men who ran alongside her have said so on camera, Freeway Rick Ross among them. Her operation is also the least documented here. There is no landmark indictment carrying her name, no sentencing memo quoted in a newspaper, no wiretap transcript sitting in the public record. What exists is her own account and the accounts of people who were there. What is on the record is prison. Hood served federal time on fraud, drug trafficking, and a weapons charge. The weapons count is the detail that says the most, because the government was not describing a woman who sat behind a desk counting somebody else's money. In 2021, BET Plus released a feature film about her called Big 50, directed by Russ Parr, with Remy Ma playing the lead. It went straight to the top of the service on release. Hood runs a non-profit in Metro Detroit now, serving families and women coming home from prison, and she named her production company 50 Shades. On her own website, she uses a title nobody had to hand her, The Godmother of Detroit. Armaretta Perry was not a street name, not a shooter, and not a boss. She was somebody's aunt, and she drew one of the longest sentences in the biggest drug case Washington, D.C. ever ran. Her nephew was Rayful Edmond III, and by 1988, he had built something no dealer in the capital ever had. Federal records described a network handling as much as 1,700 kilograms of cocaine a month, roughly 150 sellers and enforcers, and $2 million in a strong week. Prosecutors linked more than 30 homicides to the territory it controlled. Washington became the murder capital of the country while it ran. Her part of it was smaller and closer to home. It was a family business, literally. Rayful's mother, Constance Perry, known as Bootsy, was caught on tape admitting she taught her son to sell to government workers when he was a boy. Sisters, cousins, in-laws, all of them inside it. Armaretta Perry lived in and controlled 407 M Street Northeast, the house Rayful grew up in, and the hub of the whole conspiracy. She packaged cocaine there, and the phones in that house were wired. The product went to a 2-block stretch of Morton Place and Orleans Place Northeast called the Strip. Sellers worked 8-hour shifts around the clock, and a runner could empty a bundle in minutes. It looked like a row house on a quiet block near the Capitol. When police searched it on February 5, 1988, they pulled 200 grams of cocaine out of it. The case broke in April 1989. Judge Charles Ritchie handed down sentences the following year. Armaretta Perry received 33 years and 9 months, the second harshest penalty in the case. Ritchie said what he never forgot was the language she used on the wiretap about her own race. She had presented no evidence at trial and said nothing. 7 years later, she finally spoke at a resentencing, apologizing while still denying she had played any major role. The judge cut 5 months. Rayful Edmond turned informant and traded cooperation for his mother's freedom. Bootsy Perry walked out in 1998, 8 years into a 14-year term. Rayful got his sentence cut and died in Miami in December 2024. The deal he cut was for his mother. It was never for his aunt. Eucaris Ceballos Trejos was a 54-year-old Colombian grandmother with houses in Hollywood, Florida, and Jersey City, New Jersey. In the federal record, she appears as United States versus Ceballos, also known as Tulia. Prosecutors said it had run 12 years before anyone built a case. It sold a Colombian brand called Reina, strong enough that buyers paid up to $17,500 a kilogram. Ceballos recruited young Hispanic men to do the moving. She ran her traffic through cellular phones, which federal wiretap capability had not yet caught up to. The people who worked for her called her Tulia, and witnesses testified they said it with respect. That is the entire reputation. There is no crew name, no shooters, no territory war, no body count anywhere in the file. What the government described was a business moving hundreds of kilograms a week and clearing close to $1 million. Then the government came for it. It took an 8-month undercover operation and court-authorized surveillance on home, pay, and cellular phones. Agents arrested her in November 1987, and she was held without bail. In May 1988, a grand jury named her the principal administrator of a continuing criminal enterprise. That phrase carried everything. Congress had rewritten the Kingpin statute 2 years earlier, so a conviction as principal administrator triggered a mandatory life sentence. Federal prosecutors said she was the first woman in the country ever charged under it. Then came the trial, and it ran 3 months. Her attorney, John Furlong, told the jury she was a little old lady who ran nothing. Through every day of it, Ceballos sat in a housecoat and bedroom slippers. The jury deliberated about 13 hours across 3 days and convicted her on every count. On November 28, 1988, Judge Garrett Brown sentenced her to life without parole and fined her $4,200,000. He told the courtroom it had come face to face with unspeakable evil. Ceballos declined to speak through the court interpreter, wearing a dark blue sweater over a red and black dress showing nothing. Her 3 co-defendants received between 8 and 25 years. Her appeal reached the Third Circuit in November 1989, and after that the public record on her essentially stops. She was 55 years old. The statute she was convicted under did not allow for parole. No release date was ever set.